So it turns out the key was not necessarily to pinch pennies, but rather, our biggest expense had actually been childcare for the longest time. So it should have, instead of covering your eyes and ears and telling yourself that these people are not really wealthy, maybe that retirement should not be my ultimate goal. Instead, you don't have to be stuck with investing in S&P 500. You can learn to. Welcome to Personal Finance Cat, where I share my personal take on personal finance. I wish a long time ago I could have realized on a deep level that personal finance is personal. Yes, there are all these personal finance gurus out there who have become very popular and gained a lot of following. You know who I'm talking about. I also believe that they are genuinely trying to help people. But to be honest, I don't know how much their advice had helped me. I was all into financial independence, retire early, or FIRE, using real estate investing as the means to that end. Even though I was able to accumulate 20 plus rental units, it wasn't life-changing cash flow. And I was getting very frustrated. It took me a long time, almost 10 years, to realize that the best personal finance advice to me was not the one-size-fits-all type of stuff. I will discuss below the 5 pieces of advice that you probably heard a lot from many personal finance gurus, which didn't work for me at all, not for lack of trying. I'm also going to discuss what would have worked for me with the benefit of the 2020 hindsight. Number 1, to become wealthy, you need to budget, be frugal, and save a large percentage of your income. In other words, as the gold standard advice offered by many finance gurus goes, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. I tried very hard to budget, to live below my means, to be frugal, etc. Truth is, I was just not happy, or not the happiest. I live in a very expensive area, and even though we made decent income, we still felt like we were struggling, which is very common amongst our friends. So it turns out, the key was not necessarily to pinch pennies, but rather to increase our income, specifically earned income. I bought into too much of those side income schemes, such as real estate investing, but to be honest, it sucked up a lot of our time as well as capital, which I'm still not sure if it was worthwhile. Had I spent my energy on increasing my earned income by switching to a different industry, such as tech or high finance, I think the outcome would have been so much better. While I was distracted by how to make side income, I completely didn't notice how crazy the tech salaries have gotten, until I heard these stories much too late about tech companies offering multi-six-figure salaries to college grads with no experience, and people making close to $1 million with a few years of experience. Luckily, I did slowly make more income by switching employers, which have made it much better for me. And that's why I'm really convinced that a better personal finance advice would have been to try to make more earned income. I have the ability and educational background to land high-paying jobs. What I lack is hands-on experience in real estate, which was hard to acquire due to various factors, including my upbringing, my aptitude, and my personality. Number 2, house hacking is a great way to save money because housing is the largest expense category. If you don't know what house hacking is, it's basically buying a multifamily house, renting out the spare units to have your mortgage paid, at least partially. We have tried very hard on this, but ultimately couldn't find anything that would work in our area. For your background, multifamily homes are usually in very urban areas, which are not ideal for raising families. That is certainly the case where we live. I remember looking at this particular multifamily in one of the towns we were looking for houses, and the tenant who lived there literally told us that the house is, quote, treacherous. He wasn't exaggerating. The house was sinking in the middle. The basement was not even accessible, and the house was on a tight intersection, which made it very accident prone. Needless to say, we didn't end up buying the house, but that experience just left such an impression on me. Anyway, we finally gave up on looking for multifamilies and ended up settling on a small townhouse so that with the money saved from not having to pay a big mortgage, we could use the money to invest in real estate out of state. Like I said earlier, I wasn't truly happy that we lived in a small house. We made it work, but with small children, it had been very difficult. So, what would have been a better piece of advice? Our biggest expense had actually been childcare for the longest time. Putting two kids in daycare cost more than our mortgage by a long shot. So we should have hired an au pair and used the difference between daycare fees and au pair fees to afford a bigger house so we can accommodate the au pair. I didn't know that au pair is so much more affordable than daycare, and it's also much more flexible. But our house at the time was just too small to accommodate an au pair. Number three, other people might appear wealthy, but they're actually poor. So don't fall into the comparison trap. Well, I get it. This is a good psychological play. And to be honest, it's good advice in general. There is one caveat though. If that's truly the case, then of course, you don't have to envy those people. But I've come to learn that there are many people who have actually really created wealth for themselves, especially in the coastal areas where innovation, entrepreneurship, and talents are prevalent. It could be through a high paying job or owning businesses or both. I recently came across this post on Blind, a social media type of app where tech people post all kinds of questions. A guy in his early 40s posted a question about whether he can afford to retire because he felt like he was burning out. His household annual income is over $500,000 and his net worth is several million dollars, not including his primary residence. He only has one kid. Problem is that he lives in the Bay Area of San Francisco and he doesn't want to go anywhere else. If you're from any town USA, you would think that this guy is doing great and should be able to retire no problem. But the replies on Blind overwhelmingly said, no, you're too poor to retire in San Francisco. Anyway, my point of citing this example is that there can be a concentration of people near you who are wealthy if you happen to live in the coastal areas. It's not that these people are pretending to be wealthy. They truly have accumulated wealth, and that's why they live in the most expensive and desirable areas. Instead of covering your eyes and ears and telling yourself that these people are not really wealthy, maybe talk to them and learn from them how they accumulated their wealth. Like the old adage says, if you can't beat them, join them. That's what I should have done much sooner. Number 4, retirement, better yet, early retirement, is the holy grail. Financial independence, retire early, or FIRE, had been my goal for a long time, as I said earlier. However, the more experience I had dealing with people from other walks of life who don't necessarily share the same enthusiasm about FIRE as me, and the older my kids got, the more I realized that retirement should not be my ultimate goal. Instead, I should find something that I'm passionate about, something so interesting that I would do it even if I'm not paid. Until and unless I find something like that, it's not time for me to retire yet, because what would I be doing filling up my time? Boredom is worse than working a job. I've seen enough people who are so bored after retirement to know this now. Number 5, invest in index funds that mimic the market, such as the S&P 500 index. Again, this may be good advice in general. However, after learning about value investing from the likes of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, I started to realize that I can actually learn how to pick individual stocks. It's not gambling at all if you know what you're doing. In other words, if you put in some work, you can potentially be doing better than the index funds. And it can be fun. There are already so many great companies whose services or products I use so much. In other words, I understand the economics of those businesses already and can make good judgments on whether at a certain price, the stocks of those companies are worth investing in. And you know what? Turns out you can't just be reading investing books to learn how to be a good investor. You have to know everything about everything, although you don't have to be an expert in them. Just knowing the quote, big ideas in each field will be very helpful. Full disclosure, I didn't come up with this. I learned it from Charlie Munger. I've never been so motivated to learn. I've read about psychology, philosophy, economics, politics, medicine, biographies, and what have you. If some big-time investor recommends the book and it interests me, I'll read it. Never thought I'd read The Republic by Plato, but here we are. Great book, by the way. Who would have known what Plato wrote around 2,400 years ago about the merits and flaws of different forms of government can still be so relevant today? And knowing about this actually does help you with investing. Anyway, long way of saying you don't have to be stuck with investing in S&P 500. You can learn to value invest, for example, if that suits you and interests you. All right, I know that sounded like a complaint fest. All I'm trying to do is to showcase how even the best personal finance advice may not help you. It's really a personal journey to figure out your own personal finance situation. It depends on your aptitude, whether you're extroverted or introverted, whether you're a salesperson or an analytical person, the geographic area you're in, the network you have, and so on and so forth. It will come from a lot of trial and error. But you know what? At the end of the day, focus on your happiness first. And it shouldn't be based on some faraway future like retirement. Before I end, I wanted to quote the most famous sentence in American history. And yes, I've been reading a biography about Thomas Jefferson. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.